My name is Tirza and I've had a business for a little over a year and a half now. I sell candles on Etsy, but I've also done in-person sales, and I also have tried to start another business before this one and learned a lot from those mistakes. Especially being a stay-at-home mom and having some experience with how to make a business work while taking care of my baby and my family and our home. The business I tried to start before this was a knitting business, and I gave a lot of thought to it. I had a business plan, I had the licenses, I got all the official documents that I needed to start that business, and I thought I had a really great niched idea. And so I was really excited about doing something that I loved. I loved knitting as a teenager, and so I thought, great, I'll make money doing something that I love. But I quickly learned that this was not really the direction I was hoping to go, and I spent a lot of money and time investing in basically a company that never even saw the light of day. Through those past experiences of trial and error through that company, I started this next company, Lucia Candle Company, which I still run to this day. And I started that with a lot of the mistakes that I made with my previous company in mind. And I took a path that was a little bit better, I think, as a beginner. Instead of jumping headfirst and kind of swimming in the deep end as best as I could, I kind of started more in the shallow end and worked my way towards the deep end. I made one or two of the items I had planned on selling that I was going to knit, and I thought, great, this isn't too difficult, I think I can do this. But the more I tried to do it, I realized that it was actually a lot more work than I thought it would be. I realized that I probably wouldn't have as many clients as I had hoped I would, or kind of dreamed honestly that I would. I realized that it just really was not a sustainable future for this business, and I needed to go back to the drawing board. One of the problems with that is that I spent a lot of money. I spent money on a website, I spent money on a business license, I spent money on, well, I almost spent money, thank God I didn't. I almost spent money on yarn to make the items. So I started spending a lot of money right off the bat without being 100% sure that this was actually going to be a product that I could sell to a customer. So I thought, this is a great idea. I think I'd buy this as a customer, which is good. You want to make sure that it's something you enjoy and feel good about presenting to customers. But if there's not an audience for it, or especially if it's a new idea that no one else is doing, that can be a great niche or a leg up on someone else, your competition. But it's also a lot harder to get momentum with something like that because no one knows about it. No one knows that they should like that item. It's a lot harder to kind of get your foot in the door because you don't really know how to market that item. So one thing that I felt like was really good with starting my candle business is create my product, create a lot of them, and test them a lot. I started small. I started with basically the bare minimum that I needed to make a decent amount of candles. I had just a pot to melt the wax in a double boiler, and I had glass jars, I had wicks, and labels. Kept it very simple. I had a very simple printer. I didn't have anything fancy. I didn't invest hundreds and hundreds of dollars into my tools to make these candles. I just spent the bare minimum that I felt good about providing a good quality product to a customer while still keeping it within my budget. I think I spent a couple hundred, honestly, on the wax and everything to start up, but I factored in the costs of all that into the prices of my products. And that's another really big problem that a lot of new businesses make, is that they don't take into account all the costs that it takes to make an item. So this includes the costs of your materials, the costs of your tools to make the item, the cost of your overhead, and that can actually include some of your rent if you're making stuff at home. It can include some of your internet bill, it can include some of your time. So some of those things don't always get factored into the item. One other thing that a lot of people make as a mistake when they're first creating an item is they don't really think about the cost of the item, how much they're going to charge their customer for that item. It could be that you're going to charge $20 for a candle. Depending on the size and the quality of the candle, people may or may not pay that much for that candle. You have to take into account how much someone is willing to pay for an item. And that was one of the problems I had with those knitted goods I was trying to sell at my first business, is that I wasn't really factoring in people don't pay as much for knitted goods as they probably should, because we have a lot of quick factory manufacturing of items, and so people don't have a concept of how much time goes into a knitted item. They don't understand that it takes hours to make a little baby dress, or lots of undoing the project. So one thing to take into account is people will only pay as much as they feel like the item is worth. And that's really difficult, especially for creative people and crafters, because sometimes things take longer than a customer would feel like it should take. You run into a lot of problems trying to find a price for your item because a customer doesn't see all the hours and the work that goes into it, and you can try to explain that to them, but they might not actually see it. Or they'll just go, oh, there's an item cheaper, basically the same thing at Walmart. I'm just gonna buy that for $20 instead of this handmade dress for $150. That's where a lot of crafters can run into problems. It's really important when you're picking a craft, you either have to love the daylights out of it and not mind doing it for hours and not getting paid for the hours you're putting into it, which is not what I would recommend. Or you find an item that is easy to make, moderately low cost, and that you enjoy doing somewhat, so that you can actually want to keep doing it and not kind of get burned out and just give up on the whole project. Another thing I would recommend when you're looking at starting a new business is finding something that you enjoy, but maybe not something that you totally love. And that's another reason why I actually decided not to go through with making a knitting business, is because I actually really enjoyed knitting. Knitting was a time for me to decompress and relieve some stress and just focus on something that I wasn't pressured to try to get done at a set time. And I realized that, thankfully, before I started that business and really got it up and going, because it would have made knitting a chore and it wouldn't have been something that I enjoy and love and just kind of do for the fun of it. I would recommend finding something that you enjoy, but maybe not something that you love. You can try to do something like that, but I do think it's taking a risk, because it is making your hobby or your passion into something that is work, and it can actually give it a negative feeling when you go back to do that project or that craft. Another thing to keep in mind for mothers is that you will not have as much time as you think you do to work on your business. I started my business when I was, I think, 8 months pregnant. Thought with candles, there's times where I can take a break, I can keep working. If he needs me, I can stop in the middle of it. That was good thinking for a little while. I thought that it was going to work out and make sense, but it actually proved to be more difficult than I thought it would be to try to sustain this business and keep it going. I figured I could work on things during nap times, but my son is a very light sleeper, and for a long time when he was very little, he did not take long naps. He'd take a quick little half hour, maybe an hour long nap. And so that really wasn't a lot of time to work on my craft. And there was definitely times where I had crunch time, I had to get a candle order out, and I'd have to have my husband watch the baby so that I could try to get some of these orders out and finished and get the candles made so they're ready to ship the next day. When you're trying to include having your children and caring for them and giving them the basic needs they have and need, and also giving the basic needs you need and your husband and your family need, and also trying to do a business on the side. And that brings me to another point, that it's something that you really need to contemplate if that is a point where you're ready to take on a business and to actually give it what it needs, if you have the time and the energy to do that, because it's a lot of work. It's exciting to start a new business, and it really is exciting to have your own business, but there's a lot of stress and timelines and deadlines and projects that you've got to keep working on no matter what's happening in your family life, and you kind of have to keep up with the business. So for me, I have kind of intentionally kept my business small, kept it manageable, because I know I could probably get more business than I do if I worked harder and spent more time on it. But I also know that I value spending time with my family and with my baby, and I don't want to compromise large chunks of that time into making this business run even more and better and make more money. So that is something that you and your family need to decide if you are wanting to keep your business small or if you're wanting to scale it big and make that more of your income. If that's your decision, I would highly recommend that you talk with your spouse about maybe both of you working on that and having that become your family business, because it does become a lot of work to try to do a big business like that, and it's a lot for one person to keep up with that. Another thing that you can do is you can outsource things like accounting or shipping, or try to have a family member or a friend maybe go into the business with you and help take some of that workload off of you, because it does get very stressful when you're up late at 2 a.m. I've done it, and you're trying to get an order ready for the next day, and it just becomes a lot of pressure on you and your family. And so you really need to contemplate if that is something that you're willing to do and that you're up for as a family and for you as an individual. Another big thing that you should keep in mind as an entrepreneur is that you are going to have to work hard at this. It's not something that you can kind of just sit by and sales are going to come in, people are going to come to you. You have to go out and get customers. You have to make the effort to email people, to message people, to do SEO on websites if you're going to sell online. You have to do the work to go to a farmer's market. You have to do the work to get people interested in the product that you're trying to sell them. So it's not something that you can kind of just twiddle your thumbs and wait for business to come in. Now, I would label myself an introvert. I am not the kind of person that's really good at starting up a conversation with a stranger. I'm not really good at reaching out to people and selling my product. But that's something you just have to do as an entrepreneur. That is a fact of being an entrepreneur, and especially being a small business, is that you do have to sell your product. But keep in mind, that doesn't mean you're selling people a product that's not good. Sometimes it's easy to feel like if you're selling to someone your product that you're kind of weaseling your way in, and that's not it at all. You're selling a product that you feel good about and that you feel like will make a difference in someone's life. So you need to believe in your product. That's a reason why you really should make a product that you feel proud of and that has good quality and that will actually make a difference in someone's life. You want to make it something that will inspire other people. Once you have a product that you feel good about, you're not just selling them something to get them to make a sale. You're selling them a product that you really believe will make a difference and make an impact in their life. And it's actually a favor to them that you're trying to get them interested in your product, because you know it'll actually make a difference for them and it'll be worth their money. One thing that I've been running into recently with my own business, and it's good that I'm running into this, but this is definitely a downside of running your own business, is that not everyone is going to love your product, or there might be hiccups or bumps along the road. And recently I got a pretty negative review on my Etsy shop, which was honestly pretty demoralizing, and I was pretty frustrated and kind of just feeling like, why am I doing this? What's the point of all this? And it's one person out of 25, 30 people that have left very positive 5-star reviews raving about my candles, and I've made over 130 sales on Etsy and not really run into problems. And this person, one of the things that you run into with the business is that people will blame you for things that are their fault. And so not take blame for, some of the comments she had about the quality. I'm trying my best. I'm a small business. Like I said, I started up small, and so there's always room for improvement, and I appreciate the advice to improve my product. But it's good to keep in mind that sometimes people of their own fault will buy your product not realizing what they're buying. And so you just have to take it with a grain of salt, apologize. I offered a refund because I value her input and I value wanting to have her have a positive experience, because especially with small businesses, word of mouth is definitely a big way that you can make a lot of growth. She declined the refund, and so I kind of was just stuck between a rock and a hard place, because she was disappointed that the product was not what she expected, even though it was clearly stated what the product was. It's just good to keep in mind that you really have to take those negative reviews, especially if they're not something that you have control over. Sometimes shipping is a complaint, and that's not really something you have control over as a seller. It's good to keep in mind that that's just their opinion, that's their mistake, that's where they're at in life, and you really need to look at the positive reviews and the good things that people are saying about your items to keep your spirits up and not letting you become demoralized. It's good to take advice, if people have legitimate complaints, but a lot of it was honestly her looking at the listing and the description, or lack thereof of looking at it. And so I just wanted to encourage you that if you do hit up some bumps in the road of people complaining or giving you negative feedback, especially if it's not something you have control over, you just have to take it with a grain of salt, because that's where they're at. And it doesn't define you and your business. It doesn't mean that what you're doing is useless work. It's very easy to see one negative review out of 100 positive reviews and just get stuck on it. But it's really important to keep moving forward, keep trying to improve, and keep trying to make good and better products, and just take it as constructive criticism. So I've been selling on Etsy for about a year and a half. I basically started my business on Etsy, and then after a couple months, I had a few farmers markets or craft fairs that I went to and sold some of my products in person, but the majority of my sales have been on Etsy and online. Etsy and my experience with it, why I would or I wouldn't recommend Etsy, and maybe some other options that you have instead. So Etsy is a great platform for just getting your foot in the door really quick. The setup is a little bit long because you have to put every listing in individually and set up your shop. But if you're looking for something that's pretty easy setup and startup, Etsy is a pretty good option. I would also recommend setting up a Square account. You can also set up a website with them. And also Shopify is another good option a lot of people enjoy. I have not personally used Shopify. It's a little expensive for the amount of sales that I'm making right now. I believe it's $30 a month for Shopify. I'm not sponsored by any of these programs. I just am mentioning them because they're the ones that I've run into or personally used myself. So Shopify is, I think, from my understanding, good if you're making a lot of sales, because you only pay once a month. It's $30 and you can have as many sales and listings. They probably charge something for credit card payments, but if you're making a lot of sales, that's probably a good option to go, because it does save you on selling fees that you get with Etsy. Because I'm not making tons and tons of sales and profit at the moment, Etsy tends to be a better option for me, and Square is nice because you can also do in-person transactions. So I've used Square for that kind of stuff, and they integrate together, Etsy and Square, so that you have your sales all kind of in one place and you can see all the sales you made and the profit that you've made, which is also really handy to look at and review to see how much money you've made in the last whatever amount of time. I would highly recommend having another website other than Etsy. There's a lot of sellers that have a lot of complaints about Etsy. It is definitely becoming more of a Amazon than a homemade crafts place. One thing that I know is a frustrating point for me as a seller is that on Etsy, just like on Amazon, at the very bottom of a listing, they show all the other items that other sellers are selling that are very similar. And that's very frustrating as a seller, to feel like your competition is kind of right there in the customer's face. And that's really annoying as a seller, because it might be great for the customer. They can figure out whatever they want to buy, But as a seller, you are driving traffic often, at least I am. I'm driving a lot of off-site traffic to my website because I have a very niched idea that's not very popular on Etsy. And so it's frustrating to have all of this traffic I'm driving personally to my listings and to my shop, and to feel like I'm kind of just another cog in the machine of Etsy, because Etsy just wants to make a sale ultimately. And so doesn't matter to them if it's you or another seller. As long as you make a sale, they profit from it. And so that's a fact of Etsy. It's an unfortunate reality. And I find that frustrating as a seller. Another thing that is really frustrating for a lot of sellers is that any other seller can claim that you are selling an item that they were selling first, kind of like a copyright infringement. And so it's frustrating because they have the legal right to file a complaint against you, and they have 2 weeks to act on it. And if they don't act on it, then it goes away. If they do, then Etsy reviews it and you possibly have to take your listing down. And this can be very frustrating because it's kind of a slimy way that competition can kind of knock out the other competition by reporting listings that are supposedly copycats, but they could be the one that is copying you. And so that is very frustrating as a seller because you can get flagged. And if you get flagged enough times, then your Etsy shop can actually be taken down, and you don't really have a lot of say out of the matter. And so it's really good, I think, to have a backup plan B, because you don't want to be putting all of your eggs in one basket of Etsy and all of a sudden you lose all of your sales and ultimately all of your customers. So I personally feel like it's really good to integrate your stuff and let people know there's other places to find your items where they can shop other than Etsy. If they feel more comfortable shopping on Etsy, that's great. But then you can also have a website like Square that is still reliable and trustworthy, but it also gives another option other than Etsy for people to buy your products if something unfortunate happens there. So when you're starting your business, there is a lot of work and not always a lot of return right away. So you often have to work a lot more than once you get your feet off the ground to try to get your listings SEO'd. SEO is your search engine optimization. This basically helps people find your listings, especially on places like Google and other search engines. But that's really important. I don't think you need to lose your mind over it. I know I spent a lot of time trying to find the perfect optimization for my products, but like I said, I have kind of a niche idea with my labeled candles here. And so it doesn't really work for me to spend tons and tons of time on SEO, because my product is something that people are just going to kind of have to come across, most especially on Google. They come across it a lot on Google or my social media. And I do get some traffic from Etsy, but not as much as probably your typical seller would get on Etsy. It's good to keep in mind that you're going to be spending a lot of time starting up, building your product line, building your inventory, setting up websites. This is a lot of work that you're not going to be earning a lot of money from right away. And it's important to just keep in mind that this is kind of a slow process. The idea of blowing up can happen to people, but I think it's more important to just think of it as a slow burning kind of boiling water process. It's not going to start boiling right away, but as you build and as the heat builds and as you gain more momentum, you'll be able to gain more traction and more sales and make more money. And so in about a year and a half, I'm making about a sale a week, which is pretty good. Last year, I was making almost no sales for months. And so it's just good to know that sometimes in the beginning, it's a lot of work and it can be kind of discouraging when you're first starting out, but it just takes time, especially for people to find you and to find your products and to try them. And then sometimes you get repeat customers. Kind of builds a lot of momentum and traction and income. And also people will ship them out as gifts to friends or to family, and that kind of helps you network in finding other customers. Another thing I would really recommend is making sure you don't box yourself in with your business. Again, the idea I had before would have been kind of limiting as far as products that I could have sold, There was some room for growth, but it's really important to keep in mind whether it's your name or your mission or your products that you can expand to other items if you'd like to. For example, with Lucia Candle Company, I am a little limited in that, generally speaking, I try to keep my products at least with beeswax in them so that there is still kind of this theme of 100% organic beeswax, which is a big selling point that I have for my products and for my business. But just keep in mind that you might want to expand in the future, and it also helps broaden your customer base if you have more items that you can sell. For example, some of the items that I've thought about selling are other church candles, other sizes, other shape. I used to sell scented candles, and so I can still bring those back if I'd like in the future. And so it's just good to have a lot of options, because one thing to keep in mind is that you might actually change directions in your business as you grow and as you change and as you see your customer base. I started out with just scented candles, and then I started doing these unscented that you see behind me, these unscented Orthodox quote candles. And I was finding that I had a lot more customers for that item than I did for the scented candles, because scented candles is a very saturated market right now, especially on Etsy and online. And so I was finding a lot more customers that were interested in these candles instead of my scented candles. In the future, I might bring back the scented candles, but for right now, I have more of a niche market for these candles. And then maybe once I have more customers, they might also be interested in scented candles down the road. So I have that ability to grow and to expand as I need or as I want. So going forward with my candle business, I am looking forward to doing church candles for weddings and baptisms. I'm looking to do molded candles. I have actually just got a mold in that I'm really excited about. I am also looking forward to possibly doing some gift boxes for mothers, maybe gardeners, cooks, and just kind of expanding some of my inventory, especially now that I'm seeing that I'm getting a lot of customers that are interested in my products. After a year and a half, it's been very exciting to see the growth in my business, to see the feedback of customers, the excitement of them giving them as gifts to friends or enjoying them themselves. I've noticed that a lot of people are just really inspired about very niche, creative, new ideas. So if you're able to find something that is kind of a twist on an old favorite, people really enjoy that. And especially something that is personalized and unique. That's one of the beautiful things that Etsy is, that it is a marketplace where you can find unique gifts, sometimes personalized. And so I also would highly recommend, if you can find ways to personalize your items and your gifts. A lot of people really like feeling like they're giving someone something that they couldn't have gotten elsewhere, like a Walmart or a Target or even Amazon. And so having things that can be personalized, or even just a little note, a handwritten note in the item, can make a lot of difference for a customer in feeling like they're giving a high quality, personalized, special gift to their friends or family. I can be found on Instagram at Lucia Candle Company. I'm also on YouTube, as you can see here, at Of Such Is the Kingdom. I also have a personal blog Instagram that is at Of Such Is the Kingdom. And I do a lot of really great inspiration for moms or other videos like this to help inspire moms about their lives and their walk as Christians, try to live their life as best as they can, and also just provide encouragement for mothers who are struggling with their children or with their life, or give inspiration for marriage and family life. Thank you so much for watching this little interview of myself and my candle business. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you a lot of inspiration and ideas, and I hope it encouraged you, reality check, to start your own business and to keep in mind that there is a lot of excitement from running your own business, but there's also a lot of struggles and difficulties, but it's also all part of the process. and you can do it. If you have the inspiration, if you have the motivation, it is totally possible to run your own business as a stay-at-home mom, but it is going to take a lot of work and patience and time, and it's just good to keep in mind all of those things when you're starting so that you don't burn yourself out and end up quitting the whole idea to begin with. If you liked the video, please hit the like button down below. If you want to see more great content like this and inspiration for mothers who are Christian, live their life as best as they can where they are right now. Subscribe down below and comment down below. Is there any business that you've always dreamed about doing and that you've had a lot of inspiration and you're just not really sure what steps to take? Comment down below. I'd love to start a conversation with you all, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.